All right, welcome to another deep dive. Looks like you've sent us some fascinating stuff to unpack this time.
Yeah, some really dense mathematical concepts here.
You got two PDFs, Abstract Mathematical Construct 01 and Abstract Mathematical Constructs 02, and then this poem you sent. I gotta say, I'm not quite sure I follow it.
Yeah, it is a bit cryptic.
But hey, that's what we're here for, right?
Yeah,
To dive in and try to make sense of it all.
absolutely. I'm curious to see if we can connect the poem to these mathematical constructs you mentioned.
Me too, me too.
Yeah,
Okay, so where should we start? Maybe with a quick overview of what these PDFs are all about.
sure. They both seem to be exploring systems that are constantly changing, evolving, but within certain boundaries, you know?
So like a dance with very specific steps.
Yeah, kind of. There's this tension between structure and randomness that both documents seem to be grappling with.
Okay, that's interesting. And the first one, Abstract Mathematical Construct 01, it introduces this idea of a process space, right?
Exactly. It's like a mathematical arena where all these elements are interacting and changing based on certain rules.
So like a constantly shifting landscape.
Yeah, you could think of it that way. And within this process space, we have these mappings, which are like snapshots of how things are arranged at any given moment.
Okay, so like a series of photographs capturing the changing landscape.
Right. And each mapping is defined by certain variables like hen and geen.
Okay, now you're losing me a bit. What are those?
Think of them like, well, M is like a dimmer switch. It controls the intensity of how the system's rules are applied.
So it's constantly adjusting.
Yeah, exactly. While min is more like a regular light switch, it's either on or off, representing a specific state.
Got it.
So
And it,
then you can think of that as a blueprint, a guiding structure for how the system evolves.
okay, so we've got this dynamic system, elements constantly changing, rules being tweaked, and an overall plan guiding the whole thing. What really caught my eye was this transformation rule.
Ah, yes, that's where things start to get really interesting.
It sounds like it dictates how everything changes over time, right?
Exactly. And the kicker is it's governed by this binary condition. It's like a constant coin flip determining which direction things will go.
Oh, wow. So even with the blueprint and the rules, there's still an element of chance.
Precisely. That's where the transition function comes in. It brings in this probability element.
So it's like at each step, things could go one way or another, depending on this coin flip.
Right. And as the system evolves, we see then our dimmer switch gradually decreasing while Lun undergoes a quantized contraction.
Hold on.
Exactly.
Quantize what now?
Basically, it means that some aspects of the system become more defined while others fade away. It's a process of refinement.
Ah, okay. I'm starting to get it.
But wait, there's another layer of complexity. We have xn, which is a stochastic event. It throws pure randomness into the mix.
So like a completely unpredictable wild card.
Exactly. It's like the universe is throwing a wrench into the works just to keep things interesting.
So even with all these rules and conditions, there's still this element of surprise.
That's right. It makes predicting the exact path of the system's evolution pretty much impossible.
It really is a dance then, like the poem suggests. Outcomes danced, like tricks well played.
A very intricate dance indeed. And even with all this randomness, the document stresses that the evolution is still structured.
So there's a direction, an overall goal, but the journey to get there is unpredictable.
Exactly.
This is fascinating stuff. I can already see some potential links to the poem.
Me too. I'm excited to see where this goes.
And even with all that unpredictability, it still reaches a terminal state, right?
Right, like a predetermined endpoint.
And it all feels very well ordered, even with the chaos. But then we get to Abstract Mathematical Construct 02, and whoa, things get really wild.
Yeah, the second document brings in perturbative interactions, external forces that can disrupt the whole system.
It's like throwing a wrench in the gears, right? Except the wrench is more like a meteor shower.
Uh-huh, that's a great analogy. These perturbations can really shake things up.
So now we've got the internal rules, the randomness, and D as these outside forces to consider. How does the system even cope?
Well, that's where its adaptability comes in. The second document introduces a whole new set of variables to account for these perturbations.
Okay, like what?
Well, there's a known, for example, it represents the intensity of the external forces.
So it's like a measure of how strong those meteor showers are.
Exactly. And the transformation rule, which dictates how the system evolves, has to factor those in now. It's a decaying propagative rule, meaning each step is influenced by the previous one, disruptions and all.
So it's like the system is learning from those disruptions, adapting to them?
Yeah, you could say that is a fascinating process. And then you have anon, which add another layer of complexity.
Hit me with it. What are those?
Well, n is like a structured bias added at each step, while dun is a scaling factor, adjusting the system's response based on past conditions.
Okay, so add is like a nudge in a certain direction.
Right, and is like taking into account the lessons learned from past experiences.
Gotcha. So it's like a constant feedback loop, right? The
Yeah.
system is learning and adapting as it goes.
Exactly. It's a very dynamic process. And then there's the probabilistic interference mechanism. This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. Lay it on me.
All right, so there's this function, head is. It acts like a gatekeeper for those external interventions.
Blamey.
It determines whether a perturbation will actually have an impact on the system, and if so, how big that impact will be.
So some of those meteor showers might just fizzle out, while others cause major upheavals.
That's the idea. And there are two key factors at play here: the probability of intervention, P, and the intensity of modification.
So P determines how likely a meteor is to hit, and is how big the boom is when it does.
Ah, exactly. It reminds me of that line from the poem you mentioned, "Yet shadows found a flaw by night." Those perturbations, those external forces are like shadows constantly probing for weaknesses.
And the system is trying to patch those weaknesses, adapt and evolve as it goes. It's kind of a battle, isn't it?
It is. It is. But even with this constant struggle, the system ultimately reaches a state of asymptotic stabilization.
Asymptotic. I can say that 3 times fast. But seriously, what does that even mean?
It means that even with all those external forces bombarding it, the system eventually settles into a stable state.
So it finds a new balance.
Precisely. It incorporates those past disruptions and emerges as something new, something more resilient.
It's almost like those meteor showers are helping to shape the landscape in a way.
That's a great way to put it. The system isn't just surviving those disruptions, it's using them to become stronger.
It's like that line in the poem, they fought, they built, they struck, they fled. It's all part of the evolution.
That's right. It's a beautiful example of how a system can use chaos to its advantage.
This is blowing my mind. I never thought I'd find math so poetic. So it's like taking all that chaos, all those meteor showers, and turning it into something beautiful.
In a way, yes. The system finds a way to integrate those disruptions into its very structure.
This whole thing about chasing what's dead, though, from the poem, I'm still mulling that over.
It is a curious line, isn't it? Perhaps it's a warning about clinging too tightly to the past?
Like trying to rebuild the same structures even when they no longer serve a purpose.
Yes, exactly. Ignoring the new landscape that's emerged.
So it's about being willing to let go, to adapt to those changes.
Precisely. Otherwise, you risk becoming stagnant, trapped in a cycle of repeating the past.
Chasing ghosts, like the poem says. It makes you think about all sorts of systems, doesn't it?
It does. Political systems, social structures, even personal belief systems. Anything that can become rigid and resistant to change.
What happens when a system can't adapt, when it just keeps chasing those ghosts?
Well, it risks becoming irrelevant, obsolete. Eventually, it collapses under the weight of its own rigidity.
So it's all about finding that balance, right? Between maintaining order and embracing change.
That's the key. It's a delicate dance for sure. But those systems that can master it, they're the ones that thrive.
The ones that learn to dance with the meteor showers, so to speak. Wow, this has been a really thought-provoking deep dive. We started with these abstract mathematical concepts and ended up with some pretty profound insights about life, the universe, and everything.
Haha, it's amazing how these things connect, isn't it? Math, poetry, the very nature of existence, it's all intertwined.
It really is. So to our listener out there, we hope this has given you something to ponder. Maybe you see the world a little differently now, a little more dynamic, a little more full of possibilities.
And a little less about chasing ghosts.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us on this mathematical adventure. Until next time, keep those minds open and stay curious.